Okay, it says we are live. Can someone confirm that? Actually, I'll just go. Oops.
Okay, it says we are live.
Oh, okay, we're on. Are we good? I'm seeing nods. Y'all are muted, but I'm seeing nods. So I'm going to take that as a win. Well, hello, everyone. I just heard my significant other yell from the other room that he sees me. So we're on. Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our third and final From Arthur's Seat Volume 5 launch party live stream. We had quite a few technical difficulties getting started. It seems like the entire country was on Zoom at the same time, probably for religious services. But we are back on, and we're very, very happy to see you. So today we have a great lineup of readers once again. For many of them, this is their second time reading. So if you're joining us for the second or third time, you might recognize some faces. If you're not, then welcome, and everyone here is new and fresh. So I'd like to begin by just talking a little bit about From Arthur's Seat, if you're not already familiar. Talking to a couple of our team members who made the anthology come together, and then we'll jump right in with the readings. So From Arthur's Seat is an annual anthology of prose and poetry put together by students in the Creative Writing Masters program every year. This year we put out the 5th volume of the anthology, which is very exciting. I was fortunate to have an advanced proof copy because I'm the copy editor, so this is what it looks like. I think it's a very beautiful book, and I just want to give a shout out to our art director, Anna O'Connor, who did the illustration for this beautiful book. She did, I believe, with like wood block cutting, and she did it all by hand, and so it's just really gorgeous. And then this is what the back looks like, and I just wanted to give her props for that because it looks really good. And this beautiful book is available for you to purchase. We'll leave a link in the comments shortly, but you can go to FromArthurSeat.com and it will direct you for how to purchase your own copy right away. Great, with that out of the way, I'd like to talk to a couple of our team members. We have today as a reader and participant, Lena Kraus, who was our editor-in-chief this year. And she can tell you a little more about what that job entails, but she essentially led this whole train and did a really great job and brought this project together. So Lena, could I get you to talk a little bit about your experience as editor-in-chief, what the job looked like, what you learned, highlights, lowlights, etc.
I have learned how to live stream a Zoom meeting onto YouTube, and I have also learned how to integrate a PayPal button into a website. Hi everybody, thanks for that, Lauren. Lovely introduction. And I could only do it because I have such an amazing team, and the whole team has done an absolutely brilliant job. So that's also one of the biggest things that I've learned, is that once a project gets to a certain size, you can't do everything yourself. And I'm always tempted to do everything myself. And I knew it was important to learn not to do that. But this has been the best possible learning environment to learn just that, because I just knew when somebody said they would do something, they did it, and they did it right, and they did it professionally, and they did it amazingly. So that was great. And basically, also what I took away is like to just take on these challenges, because it's always worth it. And don't be scared to take on a challenge because you think, oh, there is this little element of it that I can't do yet, because when you get there, you learn it.
Wonderful, thank you, Lena. Yeah, it's been a really big pleasure working with Lena. She's just done an amazing job and really, I think, put together a great team and helped us create a beautiful product. So thank you, Lena. Next, I'd like to hear from Julianne Guerra, who was our web designer for this volume. If you look at our website, she did the whole thing. She put together the graphics. She basically overhauled the entire website. So Julianne, do you want to tell us a little bit about what that was like?
Sure. Thanks so much, Lauren. Basically, the website for From Arthur's Seat came into play last year with Volume 4. but they very much made it based on the volume 4 anthology. And so I kind of had to go in and do a complete redesign of the website. And my goal for it was to make it a little bit more general and not just one volume based, so that hopefully next year and years to come don't have to do another complete redesign of it. And again, worked with Anna to create a new logo that you see at the top of the website. Lena and I went back and forth with different blog posts, and like she mentioned earlier, that PayPal buy button was a little bit of a pain for a few hours this week, but eventually we figured it out. And yeah, so, and although it was kind of like I was the web designer, whatever, it was definitely a teamwork thing that went into it, and everyone, you know, submitting bios and everything else. But yeah, it was definitely a fun project to take on. So I hope you all like it.
Thanks, Julianne. That was awesome. Cool. It looks like we have some people saying hello and cheering us on in the comments, which is really, really great to see. So hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Now that we've heard from a couple of the team members, I think we'll just jump right in with the readings. So today you'll hear from 9 different writers. We have a lot of stories and we have one poet today, and I'm very excited to hear from them all. So we'll just get started. We're going to do these sort of in pairs. So we'll have 2 people read, and then we'll take some questions, and then we'll have 2 more people read, etc., until we have an odd number at the end. So first up, we're going to have M.H. Monica and Zala Jambrovich-Hatic. Monica unfortunately could not get her video to work, so you'll just have to listen to her beautiful voice and story when she comes up. So we'll start with her. M.H. Monica is a writer, editor, and animal enthusiast from India. She received an award in the British Council's Agatha Christie short story competition, which was part of what compelled her to become a writer. When she isn't writing, she likes to curl up with a good book, movie, or anime. Monica was a prose editor for the FAS team this year. After that, we'll have Zala. Zala is a Slovenian writer and editor. She volunteers as a beta reader in her free time, is an avid foodie, and enjoys discovering new fictional worlds as well as creating her own. Zala was also a prose editor for FAS this year. So thank you both. Monica, take it away.
Good afternoon, guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah, just speak up as much as you can, Monica.
Yes. Hi. I'm Monica, and I'll be reading out my story, Kalpana. A calm prevailed as the horizon stretched out endlessly. The sky and sea blended as they shared the same bright blue. The SS Rani, queen of the sea, glided forward with her 3 white sails fluttering. Her wooden hull still had the shine of a new vessel. Her flag, a gold lion on a navy blue background, fluttered back and forth. The berth deck underneath was well maintained, and the hammocks of the crew were close together, giving it a cozy appearance. A strong wind blew Rani towards her destination, Kalpana, the land of lost treasures. Captain Akhil stood at the helm, a solemn expression on his face. The tattered map taped to the table next to him was one of its kind. Filled with curious symbols, it pointed out the dangers they would face on their quest. Many had set out on the journey before them without the map, and none had returned. Captain, First Mate Kunal appeared at Akhil's side. There's a storm approaching. It wasn't there a moment ago, but the clouds are quickly gathering. He nervously handed over the telescope to his captain. Akhil knew as he stepped starboard, leveling the telescope towards the horizon, that Kunal would take over the helm deftly. After all these years, some orders could be left unsaid. He watched as the thunderclouds gathered with mysterious velocity. Akhil checked the direction and speed of the wind and looked at his compass. The needle was spinning around rapidly. I've never seen clouds like these before. They aren't moving with the wind, he thought. A strong gust blew the ship backwards. The crew on deck jolted from the sudden impact. Captain Akhil quickly regained his balance, thrust his captain's hat firmly back into place, and took charge. All hands on deck. Lower the sails. secure the ropes. His men moved swiftly with the discipline of ants, each aware of their role on the ship. SS Rani had only been their home for the past 2 months, but the crew had known each other and worked together over many years. Their previous ship, SS Veera, had been hit by a terrible storm and, thanks to Captain Akil's leadership, the crew had survived. Veera, however, hadn't. It was a sore topic among the crew, and they avoided talking about it. They had used all the money they had salvaged from the sinking ship and bought the Queen of the Sea. She was a beauty, much smaller than Veera, but more magnificent. And Rani would deliver them to the lost treasures of Kalpana. The men worked with all their might as the storm descended on them. Waves raised the ship high and crashed it down like a roller coaster. The boats groaned but resisted the water's attempts to breach. I won't let another storm take my ship, Akil muttered to himself. With renewed determination, he began barking out instructions to his crew. Darkness and cold winds engulfed them. The only light that illuminated their plight came from the ferocious lightning that was trying to split the skies apart. Salt stung their eyes and filled their mouths with the taste of raw fish. Their drenched clothes clung to their bodies. Rain and sea unleashed their fury, rattling the Rani and all those who called her home. This storm is worse than the last one, Pranav yelled as he held on to the ropes for dear life. Don't mention that storm. No one wants to remember that, Satya said nervously, watching Captain Akil secure the mainsail and ducking as the boom swung by. Don't worry, boys. Captain has saved us countless times. He's not going to let you down today, Kunal called out from the helm. After what felt like forever, the storm seemed to settle down. The sea stopped its thrashing. Just as the boys began to breathe easy, a loud roar reverberated from the Rani, all the way to their very bones. What was that? Pranav asked. Goosebumps prickled every inch of his skin. Thunder, maybe? Satya squeaked. Thunder doesn't come from underwater, Captain Akil said, doubt clouding his brow. His hand instinctively inched towards the sword and revolver he kept on his belt. And to find out what happens next, please read the rest of the story on From Arthur's Seat, Volume 5. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ala, and I will be reading the beginning of my short story titled The Hunt. I come from the north. The plains were my home once, and my people were of the desert, but the sun was cold there and the sand white. The traveler's words were sharpened by an accent Shem had come to associate with heavily bearded nomads who wore no jewelry and had skin only slightly darker than goat's cheese. He'd seen it turn a painful shade of red within minutes of being exposed to the hot desert sun. Shem's eyes darted around the circle as the nomad paused to take a sip of his ale. People of all sorts crowded around the bonfire, sitting on woven blankets or the bare stone of the square, standing, parents carrying their children to give them a better view. Everyone's eyes were on the nomad's face, their expressions rapt. When I was 8 cycles old, my father allowed me to join him on a hunt across the marshes in the Hare mountain range. Few animals lived near our village, but the mountains were teeming with wildlife. Shem felt a grin bloom on his face as he leaned forward in anticipation. Hunting stories were his favorite. They were always so full of adventure and traveling and creatures that couldn't possibly truly exist, which is exactly what he would have said mere hours ago about the animals splayed at the nomad's feet. For the 1000th time that evening, he glanced at the magnificent feline, its smoky coat blotted with black and steel-gray spots gleaming in the light of the flames. If not for its size, Shem would have claimed it was a cat. But how could it be, when its head almost reached the nomad's hip line when standing? Besides, none of the strays that ran around his city had a pattern even remotely similar to this one. The way the large spots followed one another almost reminded him of snake scales. Her name is Tawa. I found her 8 days into the hunt. She was bleeding, an arrow stuck in her shoulder, probably an awkward shot. The man moved his fingers to her left shoulder and pushed aside some of the fur to show off the scar hidden beneath. Tawa jerked, but otherwise remained calm. How did you get near her? Didn't she attack you? Shem blurted out, remembering too late that it was considered impolite to interrupt the nomad's tales. The boy sitting on Shem's left side elbowed him with a pointed look. Thick black lines ringed the traveler's green eyes. There was an intensity to them that made Shem squirm when they focused on him. He smiled, evidently not disturbed by Shem's interjection. His white teeth, surrounded by a shaggy jet black beard, reminded Shem of the moon in the dark night sky. She did, but she was too weak to cause any real damage. Tawa's ears twitched and turned as different sounds drew her attention, but her amber eyes stayed still, focused on her master, communicating a sense of calm that Shem found odd in a creature of her wild nature. I caught her, earning myself an earful from my father, the nomad chuckled. I took out the arrow and nursed her back to health. When she was ready to strike out on her own again, we went back to the mountains and I released her. She sniffed around for a while, then padded over to lie at my feet. We've been together since. There were a few gasps of admiration from the crowd, people still staring at Tawa with large eyes, half of the crowd starting every time she moved, as if afraid she would attack. We thank you for your tale, Nomad, said someone, several murmurs echoing the words. The bearded traveler nodded solemnly, pulling a pipe from his pocket as people started to disperse, most of them keeping what they considered a safe distance between themselves and Tawa. Shem heard excited conversations spark up as they left, wondering what other strange tales they might hear around the city that night. Soon Shem, the nomad, and Tawa were the only ones left sitting at the bonfire. And I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Zala and Monica. Those were wonderful. I love to hear it. It was such an interesting experience, Monica, listening to your reading because obviously there was no video to look at. And so it was much more about the sound. And I don't know if people watching the stream can see this, but Monica's little icon is like a jack-o'-lantern. And so I very much felt like I was like sitting in the dark around a fire, listening to a story time. It was very soothing. And in fact, we had someone comment, Una says that it gave the story a new atmosphere. It went well with the story. I feel in a dim place listening to a terrifying story. I love the intensity of it. And I very much felt the same way. I felt drawn in, and I thought it went perfectly well then with Zala's story later, where we have characters actually sitting around a fire listening to a storyteller. So that was really fun. We have a couple of questions for both of you. First, a question for Monica from Sky. Sky asks, how did you deal with the variety of characters in this story?
That's a great question, Sky. So for this story, I actually free-wrote it, and the characters just sort of fell in place. I was trying to pay attention to Akil, the protagonist, when I was writing it, and the others helped me when I was trying to get different people's reactions when they would be stuck in a storm as well. So I think, yeah, it just sort of fell in place for me, in this story at least.
That's great. Thank you, Monica. And then we have a question for Zala from Bhavika. Bhavika says, you have such unexpected metaphors, comparing the color of skin and goat's cheese. What images inspire you most when writing fiction?
Thank you for that, Bhavika. I think as far as metaphors are concerned, it's very spontaneous most of the time. Like whatever pops into my head when I'm writing, I usually go with that because it seems the most honest metaphor and the most appropriate one for the situation, I suppose. In more general terms, I think what inspires me is a lot of the times it'll be epic movies and movie scores. Specifically music I find very inspirational, so that's a big source of inspiration for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Zala. Thank you both. Those are some really beautiful readings to start us off. And thank you guys watching who are asking questions. Please keep them coming while we're reading. We'll try to get to all of them. Okay, our next two readers are going to be Lola Gastanyaga-Bagan and Lena Kraus. So first, Lola. Lola is a multinational, anti-nationalist polyglot with a penchant for black clothes, colorful scarves, and anything folklore. She has lived in Edinburgh for 3 years, where she takes inspiration to write the dark, magical, and disturbed. And Lola was one of our prose editors for FAS this year. After Lola, we will hear from Lena. Lena Krauss is a writer and translator with ties to Germany, Cornwall, and Norway. She writes as L.K. Krauss. Her writing explores how stories can tell the truth without being the truth. She loves mushrooms and has completed the longest canoe race in the world twice. Lena, as you know, was the editor-in-chief of this year's volume of was the editor-in-chief of this year's volume of FAS. And with that, Lola, take it away.
Hi. Here we go. She had seen them for as long as she remembered. Small, shadowy critters that scattered around in nooks and corners and skittered on the edges of her vision. No one else saw them, she'd learned early on. A fat little finger pointing inquisitively, asking Mummy, "What is?" But Mummy didn't see the shiny, oil-slick colored shells that crawled along the pink digit, up her, onto her, into her hair and her ears. Mummy, irritated, snappy, eyes that didn't turn to look at her, but stayed firmly fixed on the laundry, the groceries, the Hoover. A downturned mouth. Mummy, what is? Repeated, until Mummy made the tutting noise with her mouth. Once, twice, and then the questions stopped. It was unnatural. Questions are to be asked by children, such as the law of the land, and when she grew up without them, people noticed. Not consciously, not overtly, but they knew. They felt it in their little fingers and their wisdom teeth, like crows a storm. The girl was odd, off. The neighbor knew it, the baker knew it, her report card knew it. Interior, it said, disguising revulsion as polite concern. Has a difficult time socializing. Hasn't mastered social interactions yet. This was no wonder. Her peers knew it too. Socializing is an act of two, a tug of war between parties willing, and they did not want anything to do with the eerie, quiet little thing that never looked at them directly, never talked, never questioned. Her eyes were pallid and round like a fish, and they stared intently at nothing at all, as small teeth thoughtfully nursed a thin bottom lip. They rolled around in long figures of 8, trailing around the room and traveling along beams and curtains. But no matter how hard her classmates looked, they didn't see anything for the girl to pay such close attention to. "What are you looking at?" again and again, turning into, "What's wrong with you, freak? And get away from us! Mrs. Cranley, she's doing it again!" Her classmates could not see the shiny beetles all around her, but they were there. As she grew older, they grew bolder. They emerged from the corner of her eye to crawl around in plain sight. In class, they dotted chalk eyes and traced printed borders protecting mapped countries. Closer, closer still. They crawled around the back of a classmate's head and disappeared into soft locks of hair as if they'd sunk into her skull. She'd watched them creep closer, dropping from scrunchies and butterfly clips onto the pages of her notebook, skittering across the thin blue lines until she was almost bent double over her desk. And then, a finger, thinner now, still pale pink, reaching out and squishing the shiny little bead into the paper, eyes widening and a soft exhale of breath as her finger sunk into nothing but sticky pitch black, now smeared across her schoolwork. Ink, dark and slick, like an oil spill. Thank you. Wait.
Thanks, Lola. That was lovely. I will be reading from my short story, Sherwood. It all started a couple of weeks ago when they didn't want to go to the forest. Like every day, we had switched our walkie-talkies to Channel 5 after school. "We can't come today. We're watching The Tribe. The next episode is on soon." I heard somebody giggling in the background. Was that Veronica? "Friar Tuck, is Will Scarlet with you?" They would have told me if they were meeting up, wouldn't they? "This is Will Scarlet. Yes, I'm here. We've got to go. Our series is starting." What was this series? Since when did they watch TV? We didn't watch TV. Did we still have a we? What about our headquarters? We'd found the perfect spot to build a new one after our cozy treehouse got destroyed. This time, nobody would find it. I normally ran across the terrace, jumped off, and skipped along the path, though I might have stopped to feel the hazel catkins, picking a handful and stripping them of the little crumbly bits, leaving a trail behind me, thinking of fairy tales. I didn't run that day. It was autumn, so there were no catkins either, just hints of smoke from the first coal fires when I breathed in. I felt better as soon as I reached the forest, with its smell of pine sap in the fresh, almost winter air, and the light filtering through the branches. I spotted a cluster of mushrooms that hadn't been there before and crouched down to feel the cool, silky smooth caps before I carried on, faster now, then starting to run. I stopped before I turned the corner where the fenced-off area started. I had to look inconspicuous now, just in case somebody was walking their dog. Our hut was in a regrowth area of the forest. Nobody was allowed to go in there. We'd put a lot of effort into building a path that wouldn't be visible from the outside, even if we walked it often, using the pine needle carpet under small trees, old deer paths, and sections of tunnel we'd built in the ferns. The path was empty, so I ran to the edge of the fence as quickly as I could, put my hands on the rough top of the corner post, ignoring the splinters, and pulled myself up and over. Squatting low, I quickly covered the distance between the fence and the undergrowth. This was the easy part, because it went through little copse of pines. I was able to walk upright, and the needly carpet wouldn't betray my footsteps. On reaching the clearing where the hut would be, I started working right away. I made a whole wall from ferns and fallen branches until heaviness crept from my arms and legs into my chest. I'd been working quickly, keeping myself from thinking, but now thoughts were unfurling from every corner of my mind. Why hadn't they wanted to come to the forest? What was the series they were watching? How did they know about it, and why was it more interesting than the new HQ for our Robin Hood Club? I sealed one last gap with moss. Then I started walking back, careful not to bend the ferns. That weekend, they ran out of excuses and came into the forest with me to see what I'd done. They were clumsy on the path, trampling the ferns, talking loudly and without code names. "What are you doing?" I wanted to hiss. But something told me to keep my mouth shut. I could only hope that there wasn't anybody nearby to hear us. We got to the hut, and they didn't even look at my wall at first. They were still talking about the series. "Do you even want our club still?" I was the one asking, but I wasn't sure where the question came from. Suddenly, it felt like I'd been wanting to ask it for a long time, and somehow it was really scary to wait for the answer. Little John and Will Scarlett were inspecting the leaves at their feet. "I'm relieved you asked." They looked at each other. "We don't, actually. It's super childish." They didn't even seem sorry. It was like they were trying to suppress laughs. This made it impossible for me to say I disagreed. "Okay then." I took my knife out of my pocket. It was stuck under the whistle and the handkerchief. Rookie mistake. You should always have easy access to your knife. But maybe that didn't matter anymore. Having finally unfolded it, I slid the blade under the club bracelet on my wrist and pulled. The colorful cord fell to the ground. I forced myself not to look at it and held the knife out to Veronica and Maisie. They showed me their naked wrists. They'd already taken theirs off. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Lena. Thank you, Lola. I really love those stories. I wonder if the viewers have caught on that lots of our stories today seem to be about childhood and adolescence, and that was not coordinated on our part, but it just emerged as a theme. So it's been nice to hear about different aspects of it. And we actually have a question from Bhavika, directed at both Lola and Lena. Was it difficult to write from a childlike perspective? Well, it was directed to Lena, but I'm sure it applies to both of you. So could we have you guys take it away one after the other? Lola, go first.
I'm just gonna. It was not difficult to write this from a child's perspective. There are writing exercises that I used to do that kind of make you take different perspectives. And basically, I think all stories come from life, and we've all been a child. Most of us have kind of forgotten how it felt, but it's still there, and you just have to put yourself in the zone and remember what it was like.
Yeah, I would for starters second that, because I think it's so true. I write a lot of children. I think actually I wouldn't say the story is entirely from a child's perspective. I try to keep the narrative slightly alien to her as a character because she's a little funky. But I think it's mostly just about trying to remember what you felt like as a child without all of the sort of retroactive sort of shaping of that narrative I think we tend to do as adults, where we sort of look back and we think, oh no, I thought like this, which tends to sort of weirdly frame a childlike mentality from adulthood. So I think that would be the main thing I would try to avoid.
I love it. Thank you both. I loved too, it seemed like there was a sense of these children's imagination I think being questionable in Lola's case, sort of isolating them from their peers, which I think as writers is perhaps something we've all experienced at least once or twice. So I enjoyed especially listening to these stories together. I thought it was really beautiful. Thank you both. Next, we will hear from Julianne and from Kit. So Julianne is a Massachusetts native who enjoys writing in the new adult genre. She worked as the news editor for her college newspaper, and she has a blog called Books, Travel, Life, etc. that she's been updating since she was 18, which is really impressive if you ask me. Also, we learned yesterday that she has a fantastic journal. And Julianne, as you know, worked as the web designer for FAS this year. After Julianne, we will have Kit. Kit is a fiction writer and cycling journalist who moved to Edinburgh to pursue creative writing because of Robin Williams. She writes about deeply thoughtful characters, troubled artist types, and likes to explore the fickleness of memory. So thank you both. Take it away, Julianne.
All right, thanks so much, Lauren. So today I'm going to be reading a kind of condensed excerpt from my piece in the anthology called Thrift Store Finds. So here we go. Madeline was surprised to find that the journal she found in the thrift store wasn't empty inside, but rather completely filled. As she flipped through the pages, Madeline saw worn cards, boarding passes, maps, pamphlets, and photographs. By the time her friend Kenzie came to find her, Madeline was a quarter of the way through the journal. I found a sweater that's going to look so good on you while you tour college campuses, Kenzie said. And look, the price tags are still on it. Kenzie, look at this, Madeline said, showing her the journal. It's someone's scrapbook. Why would someone donate this to a thrift store? I don't know, but look at those dates. This thing is old. Maybe she died and all of her stuff got donated. What? Why would her family get rid of this? Maybe she doesn't have any family, Kenzie shrugged. I refuse to believe the owner of this journal wouldn't have at least one person in her life who wouldn't want to keep this. All right, fine, Kenzie said, taking the journal out of Madeline's hands and walking toward the front of the store. What are you doing? Madeline asked, flinching slightly as she watched Kenzie drop the journal onto the counter with the rest of her finds. We both know you're not going to be able to let this go. So I'm going to buy it for you, and then you're going to drive yourself crazy looking for someone to return it to. Once she was back home, Madeline read through the journal from cover to cover, picking out important details. She knew the person who made the scrapbook was Amelia Carson, who appeared to be not much older than Madeline in her photos and clearly enjoyed being a tourist. She smiled with a baguette in front of the Eiffel Tower, made a funny face at a guard outside of Buckingham Palace, and took a pasta making class in Italy. There's also group photos of her with friends and family. She collected coasters from her favorite pubs. She added captions, quotes, and comments, reminding her of her favorite foods and locations in messy print handwriting. She got a short haircut in February that had grown out by June. After a few hours of searching, Madeline found 3 people she thought had the potential to be related to Amelia based on their location and social media: Carson Adams, Samantha Bailey, and Maggie Green. Madeline reached out to all of them to explain she found the journal and hoped one of them would be able to claim it. She attached a few photos of the journal and its contents so that one of them would be able to identify Amelia. 2 weeks after Madeline's social media search, Samantha Bradley claimed the journal belonged to her grandmother, and the two agreed to meet at a local coffee shop so Madeline could return it. I brought a few photos of my grandmother so you knew I was telling the truth, Samantha said with a small laugh as she pulled a folder out of her tote bag. She looked like Amelia had in the pictures taken in April of her trip, and around the same age. The biggest difference Madeline could see was that Samantha's hair was darker. Madeline looked down at the images of Amelia. Some were already in the journal, but others showed Amelia after her time in Europe. Some new ones included one of Amelia on her wedding day, one with her surrounded by what appeared to be her children and her grandchildren, one at the Great Wall of China that couldn't have been too many years after Europe, and one of her and Samantha at Samantha's graduation. She seems like a lot of fun, Madeline said. Oh, she was something else, let me tell you. She loved to travel, but she was also a strong advocate for spending the rare day in your pajamas, watching movies, and eating as much junk food as possible. Well, I'm sure she would want you to have this more than she would want me to, Madeline said as she passed the scrapbook across the table. It felt strange passing the journal off to someone she had just met, even though logically Madeline understood that as Amelia's granddaughter, Samantha probably knew all of the stories within the journal and had seen the pictures. Madeline still couldn't help but feel like she was handing over a friend's secrets. The gap year book, Samantha said, flipping through the pages. This had to be the adventure she talked about the most. It was her longest one. She left right after she graduated and spent nearly a year and a half living away from home, learning, traveling, trying to gain as many experiences as she possibly could. They chatted for about half an hour, but they always seemed to come back to Amelia. Samantha smiled down at her grandmother's scrapbook before looking up at Madeline. I don't know how this journal ended up at that thrift store, but I'm so happy you found it and made a point to return it to my family. And I'm glad you enjoyed looking through my grandmother's memories. There are going to be a ton of exciting things coming up in your life, Madeline, and the only advice I can give you is advice my grandmother would swear by. Buy yourself a journal. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Julianne. I'm going to be reading my piece of flash fiction called Jam. On the night Phillips died, I knew for sure that I would survive. He'd gone to join Tibbs and Moore and Granger and Davison and Yates and Higgins and Smith and Sergeant Stock and Captain Rivers and Mother and Rebecca and Aunt Ruth and Pop and Patch and Bubbles and Mr. Tom and Bertie. They'd snatched his life away. Phillips, who'd shared his mother's jam with the men, spooned grotesquely on 2 grimy fingers into our gaping mouths, who'd shouted crossword puzzle clues unanswered, who'd howled with a whooping laugh, who'd mastered an uncanny impression of Major Forsyth. They'd killed him, they'd stolen his future, they'd silenced his voice, they'd set him free. He had been the last of us. Everyone around me now stood in the boots of the dead or wounded. My friends, who had been filled with such hope, who had played football behind the line, whose lives brimmed with enthusiasm, spilling over in laughter. A few now lay quiet, hollow under coarse white sheets, mere spectres of their old selves, but most had been laid to rest forever under the heavy comfort of foreign mud, the lucky ones. And here I stood, blood warming my icy veins, the most ghostly of the lot, left behind to walk the earth, to traipse through hungry mud alone, left to continue the fight for something far beyond my understanding, beyond anyone's. I was empty, numb, stunned. I didn't care. I had nothing to care for. I was the perfect soldier. I accepted death. I welcomed it. But I was invincible, reluctantly, inevitably, bitterly invincible. This war would not kill me. Spanish flu would not kill me. Cigarettes and alcohol, not even grief, would eventually kill me. I would be made to wait a whole lifetime. Not Bertie. That firecracker of orange hair and dirty freckles. He was my best friend, my confidant, my comrade. Only 2 years had separated us, but he'd got stuck. I'd kept getting older, but he stayed 6 years old. Small boys fight, we all know that. Our temperatures ran high, breathless, our stringy little bodies swollen and contorted with passion and energy. We never felt anything that wasn't on a grand scale. Explosive, exciting, dangerous. Brain bleed, they called it. He hit his head on the toy box and never woke up. I didn't mean to kick so hard, both feet and burning with frustration. I can still feel what it felt like, hear the ringing in my ears, the tension in my neck and shoulders, but I don't remember why. Mother had got sick then, father too, though his was self-inflicted. And now Philip's. They'd got him in the face, ripped his jaw wide open, chunks of flesh like sticky jam. He'd never laugh again, but he didn't know it. I did. I'd carry that silence with me forever. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kit. Thank you, Julianne. Whew. Okay, those are really beautiful and quite a change in tone, but I think both deal in very interesting ways with memory, which we have learned already Kit likes to explore. We have a couple questions from people. The first is for Julianne from Bhavika. She says, Julianne, your dialogue is very natural. Have you ever tried that writer's trick of eavesdropping at coffee shops? How do you make it this realistic?
Okay. Thank you, Bhavika. I definitely have like eavesdropped before and just, heard other conversations. But I think for me, I don't know, it's kind of funny, maybe a little embarrassing. I think I just talk to myself a lot, which, hopefully at least one other person in my cohort does as well. But when I'm trying to like write a scene with a lot of dialogue, which I do a lot, and a lot of people in my workshop can attend to that too, I say it out loud and I make sure that it's something that just sounds realistic and sounds like something my characters or whoever would say. So it's just a lot, I don't know. I also grew up with a lot of people around me all the time. So I just constantly feel like I have conversation going on around me. So it's just easy to kind of pick up little things in different ways, different people talk. So I guess just through like experience and just kind of eavesdropping and then just kind of chatting with myself, I guess. And I also did just want to mention, just because at the beginning, Lauren made a comment. So I read yesterday and I showed my journal. So I thought I'd just show it again just so that everyone can see it. So this is the journal that Lauren was referencing during my little intro. And that's what the story's based off of.
I love it. That journal is so cool. Thanks for showing us, Julianne. Okay, we have a few questions for Kit. I think I can string them together, and I'll string them into a two-parter. So we have two people asking Kit. We have Una and Anna asking in different ways, like, what is the inspiration for this story? What idea kicked it off? And on top of that, Jenny asks, did you do research for this piece? How did you create such descriptive characters from this historical period in time?
Two very good questions. Inspiration wise, I don't know, I find the process of this piece of writing quite hard to explain, because it sounds really corny. The first line came to me, I was at a reading at Golden Hair bookshop, and I wrote it down in my notebook that I carry with me everywhere. And then it just kind of poured out of me in one night. Obviously I edited it, but it's about 500 words, and it was, I think, about midnight that I ended up sitting down. No, I wasn't even sitting down. I was in bed with a pad of paper, and it just happened. And so it's not like that's never really happened to me before. That it's just like, it was so organic, and I don't know. I hesitate to use the word easy because it wasn't. It's a gritty subject, but I was looking at the ideas of guilt that somebody might carry with them, and that idea of being a survivor. And as for research, no, I didn't really. It's a subject that I know quite well anyway, World War I, and time after that. I haven't written historical fiction for a while, but it's a topic that I know pretty well. So yeah, it just kind of, because it's so concise, I would say, most of it's sensual rather than historical accuracy necessarily, I think.
Love it. Thank you, Kit. I think we can all agree it was really effective, whatever your method or divine inspiration might have been. Thank you both. Those were wonderful. Okay, we have 3 more readers left for you guys today, and we'll put them all together in a block, and then of course ask questions afterward. So next up is our only poet of today's stream, Anthi Himariu, who has a BA in English and American Literature from the American College of Greece. She was longlisted in the Poetry Society's National Poetry Competition in 2017 with her poem Leftovers. Anthi also plays the cello and hopes that her love of music will manifest in her poetry. And Anthi was a poetry editor for FAS this year. After that, we'll have Julia Guillermina, who is a Spanish and French writer. Julia studies humanities, she studied humanities, specializing in medieval history. She is passionate about languages and poetry and is also a musician. She writes short and long fiction and uses it to understand human relationships. And Julia was our treasurer this year for From Arthur's Seat. And then finally, we'll have Saoirse Ibargüen. Saoirse is a writer and performer from Florida's Gulf Coast. While she enjoys writing fiction, she also spends time having adventures and writing memoirs about them. For Saoirse, writing and exploring go hand in hand. And Saoirse was a prose editor for FAS as well. So those will be our final 3 readers today. Anthi, take it away.
Thank you, Lauren. I think I need to explain this a little. It's a poem that I wrote that has taken part of the first from 12th Night, Shakespeare's play, the first part of Orsino's dialogue. And I have created my own response to every line of the first 5 lines of the play. So it is called Viola. Viola, if music be the food of love, play on. A beating stave and a bowed instrument, doubles of melody repeated or lost, inner voices in the alto clef, outer voices in the treble clef. Give me access of it, then surfeiting, follow the knight errant. Stromberg will not be disappointed. Perfect fifth and the world becomes festive. Clois is seen dancing in a field. The appetite may sicken and so die. Embroidered with silver strings, it can lie bleeding in the sound of love, vibrating with the force of the wind. Oh, it came in my ear like the sweet sound. Flowers clasping together, a hidden rainbow of sounds. Try to measure the color in a chromatic scale. You will be left with the only one that breathes upon a bank of violets, purple, the color of love. Violets cross a bank of clouds, and identities bound. Viola would laugh in a coda with dominant sevens. Thank you.
Wow, Anthi, that was great. So I'm reading from my story, Wild Wind. Evening, to the bus that stops near the marketplace, I ensconced myself back on the priority. It had been one of the windiest days in Edinburgh. The wind had pulled and pushed me all around the town. With my open coat, made me fear my feet would leave the ground. My hurting old knee had been complaining, and I reveled in the ride. When we arrived, the night had come, and the wind had faded. I was not looking ahead of me. I was not observing the people going by. I was just letting my eyelids fall on my eyes, narrowing my sight to the pavement. Suddenly, I saw a bulge of Egyptian blue, the beggar's sleeping bag. I had spotted the beggar that same morning, wrapped in his robe, stretching out both arms ahead of him, a paper cup in his hands. His whole body leaned in. His strong legs supported the effort, engaging his back instead of his core muscles, a future backache.
The people around him wandered about in the market, buying vegan haggis or beeswax wrappers. Couples, families, groups of students all eating next to each other, sharing body heat is heaven on the cold, windy day. If somebody gave the beggar a coin, he shook the cup to jog others' memories about the sound of money, the existence of money. He looked like a foul creature, half human, half sack. I forgot about him as I have forgotten about so many beggars. To my mind, with the insistence of the mad wind, the one that comes when everything settles, the wind that ensures life does not stay the same, the wind of problems and solutions. The wild wind made Deacon Brodie change at night. The wild wind that saved the witch of the grass market from death in the gallows. The beggar's bag was empty of the beggar's body. Next to it, a carton. I frowned. Why would he leave his sleeping bag there under the... I walked on, already putting this thought into the bin of bygones, when I noticed little circle paths. They were difficult to discern against the black stone of the paving. They were money, 1 penny, 2 pence. I turned my head left and caught sight of the beggar's staff again. Where was the paper cup? The coins, freed from it, had rolled to the place they were last exchanged, just before my feet. The 7 circles looked at me with round eyes. I managed to kneel, clumsy, gripping my cane with a shaking strength, my nerves bombarding my brain with messages of pain, and I took the red coins with my right hand. The dark stone was wet and sandy, and so they were stains in my wrinkled hands. I walked back despite my limping, thinking it was important. I dropped the coins in a pile near the carton, bending my back to let them go closer to the ground. They were the beggar's only possession. Where could he be, with his sleeping bag all wet in that sandy corner next to that empty carton in the wee small hours where no one was to be seen? A ghost came to my eyes and made me blink. Half a tear appeared in each of my eyes, and I felt uncomfortable. And the end is in the book. Thank you very much.
Julia, you are so great. So happy to follow you. Okay, this is a bit of memoir. It's called Forward. It's about hiking Mount Katahdin at the end of my Appalachian Trail through hike. I pull myself up to the gateway, the end of the most difficult part of the climb and the beginning of the tablelands, a rock-strewn victory walk to the summit. But I can't taste the victory yet. I can no longer see the path to the end of this journey I've been on for 6 months. With a howl almost too quiet for what it signifies, a sudden rush of clouds rolls in and entirely shrouds the mountain, closing me in, mercilessly erasing the panoramic views of Maine's jagged mountains and vast lakes. It all vanishes, all those miles I've hiked, all that land I wanted to look at from the very top. Now there is nothing but the mist, my boots, and my eyes straining to see 10 feet in front of me. I fight the urge to fall to my hands and knees and crawl the rest of the way. Though I'm bracing myself with all my strength, the wind is so strong that I imagine every time I lift a boot, I might be picked up and blown away. Could my body float back to Georgia and the beginning of the trail? Or would it go all the way to my home in Florida? I'm not sure where home is anymore. I keep fighting, looking ahead but thinking back to the early days of my hike to North Carolina, when the weather was cold, but nothing like this. I remember the conversation I had with a German woman, one of many people I would meet from around the world, all drawn by the siren song of the longest footpath on earth. The woman's trail name was Brick. Almost everyone who thru hikes the Appalachian Trail acquires a trail name, gifted to them by other hikers, by themselves, by the journey. Mine is story. Sitting with Brick in a hostel owned by a man named Zen, I both loved and felt baffled by this world of people walking, running away, using assumed names, banishing their real lives. I ran my hands over the leather cover of a decades-old trail guide. It's strange, isn't it? Said Brick. Just walking in one direction. Usually you walk for a bit and then turn around, go back to your car or something. But out here, you never look back. I didn't know what to say then. I just sat with her words. I couldn't know about any of the things I was hiking toward. I couldn't foresee the spider that would find its way into my bra and bite me, the bite that would turn into a wound, the doctor who would dig at it with a scalpel while I sobbed in a church parking lot, surrounded by other injured hikers whose health and comfort were always at the mercy of strangers and volunteers. I couldn't have known that I would reach the halfway point and spend 2 hours forcing my way through half a gallon of chocolate ice cream in order to uphold a long-standing trail tradition and prove my worth. I couldn't yet understand that all of the hardest miles truly were ahead of me, but that everything else was ahead of me too. The changing of the leaves in New Hampshire, the wild ponies in Virginia, the verdant forests in Vermont. Everyone singing Take Me Home Country Roads and dancing at the yearly hiker festival. The trail magic, and all the trail angels who would provide it in the form of warm pancakes and fresh fruit and toilet paper out of the backs of their trucks on the side of the road somewhere in the mountains. All of these things were yet to come. Out here, you never look back, Brick said. For 185 days, I have not looked back. I have trudged up mountains brown with dead leaves and deep mud. I have bounded down hills green and vibrant in their summer glory. I have faced black bears and rattlesnakes, looked in their shining eyes, and kept on walking. I have suffered hard falls and sickness, felt my skin slick with sweat and my muscles seized from exertion. I have climbed mountains from dawn until dusk every day for half a year. I've carried my life on my back and slept in the woods. I've walked 2,190.9 miles. I've traveled all the way from Georgia to Maine on my feet. Even at the end, I barely have an answer to give people when they ask why I'm doing this. I'm doing it for the little girl who knew she was meant to hike even though she was born in a swamp and had only the flattest pavement to walk on. I'm doing it because it was that little girl's biggest dream. And I could never rest until I put my hands on that sign at the end of all those miles. For her, and for the me that she grew into, I keep heading north. On this last push to the summit, I think of my first day on top of Springer Mountain in Georgia, questioning whether I could really do this. I think of the panic attack in my tent, my breath coming in short gasps as the wind whipped around me and I felt like a broken rowboat on a wild sea. Now I've almost done it, and the summit fever takes me. I may not be able to see anything through the clouds, but I know which direction to move in, forward. My feet scramble, my arms reach out to prevent a fall this close to the end. I stumble over wet rocks with abandon, knowing what's so close now, maybe just a few feet away. Blinding with melted frost dripping from my hat and my braids whipping across my eyes, I squint and can finally make out a wooden sign, desolate, alone on top of the world, waiting for me to touch it after years of dreaming. I know what it says without reading it. I rush forward into the mist. Thank you.
Thank you, Saoirse. That was wonderful. Thank you for taking us across the finish line. And thank you also to Anthony and Julia for those beautiful readings. I wanted to group these stories together because they seem to me the most adult of the selections that we had today in terms just of the content. You know, they were, or they didn't deal with memory as much, and they were very much about sort of contending with life as we experience now a little more. And especially Saoirse, I think your story was a great way to wrap up because it has such a great momentum to it, and there's a sense of a triumphant ending, but also a sort of beginning as you know, as you take this accomplishment with you into your next phase of life. So thank you to all three of you. We'll look at some of the questions that we've been asked. We had a question for Anthony from Alex, who, let me find it quickly. Anthony, Alex says, so much of your poetry is inspired by culture and literature. What's the most inspiring piece you've ever read?
I think, thank you, Alex. I think Viola has to be one, only because in my mind it connects to different worlds. It's like music and literature, because in my mind viola is a musical instrument, and the protagonist in a way takes both genders. The duality of the character as well gives itself to be able to marry these two worlds. But then again, I'm fascinated with physics and mathematics. So even if I try to dissociate myself and look at things, how they will work as a poet, um, everything that I know and learn as time passes are infused in a way in my poetry. So this has to be one, and the other it has to be empty space. That it's about the illusion of light, and that people are duped into believing that space exists as they perceive it. So I think, yeah, this is my response to that.
Thanks, Anthi. To everyone watching, we're going to answer a couple of questions that were directed at the last two readers, but also we want to open it up to you. If you have any questions for any of the readers that have shared their work today, please shoot those into the comments and we can sort of do a group discussion there at the end, because we definitely have the time for that. We have a question for Julia. Julia, first of all, we have lots of comments coming in about your fabulous hair and hairband. People are loving your look today. Well done there. We have a question from Bhavika, who asks, Julia, do you enjoy writing short fiction more or longer? How different is the process for you?
Sorry, I didn't get that exactly.
Sure, I'll ask again. Bhavika asks, do you enjoy writing short fiction or long fiction more? And is the process very different for you?
I think that I enjoy all of them. Like, longer stories are more complicated because you have to stick to them, and I'm not that patient. But I think I think the stories that can combine have different lengths. Like, there's stories that can't be longer than 500 words, and there are stories that ask you to like stick with them and make a novel. I don't know how I know, because other people have asked me before, how do I know the length of my stories? But I love short and long. Yeah.
Great, thank you. We have some questions for Saoirse. Let me find them. Oh, one more comment from Bhavika about you, Julia. She says that Scotland has rubbed off on your narration voice. She loves the lilt. It is wonderful to be doing our master's degree here in a place with such a rich storytelling culture. So I personally have enjoyed that a lot. All right, question for Saoirse from Randy. Saoirse, for you, does writing memoir begin with an experience you want to recount, or with a message you want to convey, or something entirely different?
Yeah, I think that the first time I really wrote memoir was after an experience that I had being stuck in Europe. So I had the experience, and then I thought I should write about this. And so that's how I do it now. I kind of know that I will want to write about experiences, but I don't really have like a theme until the whole journey's over, because you can't really know until you're done with something. And then you look back at your memories and you realize there are themes that happened throughout it that you can use as like a through line in a book. Yeah.
Thanks, Saoirse. And we have one more question from Alex, who asks if you have any advice for someone who wants to start backpacking. What was the greatest lesson you learned on the trail?
It sounds silly, but my advice is have really light gear if that's what's important to you. That's what was important to me. Make sure that you're comfortable, and you'll be fine. And I think the greatest thing I learned was probably to stay present and not worry so much about what's going to happen, because I was out there for 6 months and it could have ended every day with an injury. So you really just have to stay in the moment.
Thank you. Great advice. I look forward to a time when we can do that again. All right, so we're opening it now for general questions from the audience. I'll also be trying to scroll back through and see if I missed anything. But for now, we have a new question from Mia for Lena. Mia asks, Lena, is your story a children's story?
Oh, hi, Mia. Mia is my little sister, and my family are watching, and I love you guys very much. Thanks for tuning in. My story is not a children's story. No, it's definitely not. The part that I chose to read from it is looking into a young person's perspective, and I love using that to kind of as a basis for my writing. So Sherwood is a very short piece, and we had to keep it down to 1,500 words from Arthur's Seat, and that's a very compressed format, and it's going to be extended, and then the child's story and the child's experience will be the basis for the grown-ups experience. And I think that shows, like, I want to bring it back to what Lola said about coloring the child's narration with an adult perspective, and that's very much how this piece is written, because it's quite a retrospective piece. And you will also see that I've chosen a very specific excerpt to read for you today. And so if you read the whole story in FAS, then it'll be pretty clear that it's not a children's story. Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Lena. Yes, it is interesting having a little more context, and having read all the stories that we heard today. There are some key pieces of information for a few stories in here that I'm very excited for everyone else to discover. Let's see, going back, so Sky had asked Lola what made you choose third person for your story instead of first. I think you touched on that a little bit already. So if you'd like to do more on that, you can. And then Marta also has a question, which I am curious to hear the answer to for Lola, which is, what inspired your story?
All right, so in terms of person, I wanted to maintain certain distance between the character and the reader and the narration itself. So I don't think I wasn't trying to let her tell her story, because so much of her as a character centers around the fact that she's sort of yearning for this ability to communicate that she doesn't actually have. She's very nonverbal in that sense. She doesn't actually talk in any of it. And so having her narrate to us as an audience felt weird. In terms of inspiration, some of it was watching certain parents talk or refuse to talk to their children, and having spent a big part of my life witnessing how much that then impacts those children, and how much it affects them when you don't answer their questions, when you don't give them the attention that they need. And then I thought, like, having beetles made of ink would be really cool. So that's mostly it.
I love it. Thank you, Lola. Guys, we have some questions coming in about the editing process, so I'm going to open this up for any of the editors to answer. Marta asks, to the prose editors, how do you go about editing other people's work? Is it uncomfortable to communicate criticism? So go ahead and weigh in, guys. Does someone want to jump in?
So I think maybe also I'd like to hear of one of the prose editors afterwards, because I'm not technically a prose editor, I'm the editor-in-chief, but just in the meantime, while they decide who wants to speak, it is slightly uncomfortable, and you have to find, like for me, because I read all the stories on a more general basis, and then the prose editors did the more close-up works. And what I tried to do was kind of establish an understanding with the author in terms of how much feedback they wanted and how they wanted the feedback.
Yeah, I think it can be uncomfortable. I think we're very lucky in the sense that we're working with people that we know personally, and not only know personally, because that could honestly just make it worse, but they're people who I think we all we're aware that we're here to learn, to improve. We're here because we want to have these workshops. We're here because we want that feedback. And so I think that knowing that someone else really very much wants to hear my opinion made it a lot easier for me than if not. But it's difficult because you want to phrase things politely and kindly. So I guess it's also just about sort of trying to be nice about it.
Absolutely. I think it helped also that, one of the main formats of this master's degree is that we do workshop every week. And so I think we probably had all got a lot of practice, kindly and compassionately editing other people. And also we probably knew by this stage how people responded specifically to criticism. I will open up another question for you guys to consider, which is, this is open to everyone. Jenny asks, do you all find it difficult to edit yourselves? And is it difficult to have your work edited?
This is my mom asking this question. And she knows I hate editing myself. So I like to sit down and just really write something perfect the first time. I don't free write, and I don't like to go back, which I know is a bad habit. But yeah, and it's hard to have your work edited at first. Like in the first workshop, I think we were all really, really nervous, but it definitely got so much easier over time when you realize that everyone's going through the same thing. Yeah.
Can I jump in? Oh, sorry.
Oh, I just wanted to add that for me at the beginning, I was like in the kind of situation that Saoirse just explained, where I wanted to have the first draft being perfect. But then after the first semester, I realized there was a piece I didn't get that, and I wanted to edit it. And it's the first time I ever felt the want to edit something, because usually I'm like, no, I don't want to look at that again. But now, and also from Arthur's seat, he wanted to have the best version of it because it was going to be published. So now I'm kind of eager to edit things. So I think that's a good thing.
Love that. Kit, you're raising your hand?
Yeah, I would feel like I should add, because I quite enjoy the editing process, so long as I leave time. If 2 weeks can work depending on the length of the piece or how long I've spent on it already. But if there's time enough, the first piece that I submitted for workshop this whole year was something that I've been working on and off for about 2 years. So there had been space, and I was a new version of myself in a sense. So I was reading it differently. I was able to interpret it differently, and that helped with the editing process. And so I saw things, new things that I wanted to develop. Yeah, and I do tend to free write a lot. I just try, because I struggle a bit with writer's block. So just spewing words onto a page is how I start. So I have to edit religiously. But yeah, it's a difficult process, but there are ways that work, some that don't.
Thanks, Kit. I think we have Anthony wants to go, and then we'll hear from Lena, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I wanted to share that the best advice I ever gotten from a professor was like, know if you're a person that can edit their work. Myself, I'm not capable 100% to edit my work. And if you don't realize that, it's going to be a lot more difficult to do it. So you will try and fail and think that it's something wrong with you, but actually it's not. If you think that of them as two different people, the writer and the editor in yourself, then I think the process becomes more smooth and easy for anyone.
Thanks. Lena?
Editing your own work takes a lot of time. I'm pretty confident I've learned a lot about how to edit my own work, but if you're working towards a deadline, you hardly have the time for that. And then it's absolutely invaluable because you need a fresh set of eyes on it. And it's absolutely invaluable to have the sort of feedback that we have here. We all know each other and support each other and read each other's work and then give feedback. And that can kind of compress the editing schedule. If I had to do that all myself, then I would kind of have to write it and then put it away for a month and then edit it again and then put it away for 3 months. So having other people edit it definitely is a big help.
I love that, and I so agree. I think we have time for one more question. So let me pick the one that I think will be the best for us to leave off on. Yeah, I will take this question and then sort of flip it on its head. Marta asks, barring current circumstances, what do we think was the most challenging aspect of this process? So I want to add to that question, like what's something that we've all learned from this process that we will take with us going forward? So who would like to weigh in there? I'll get started and then you guys can pick it up. I think, as Lena mentioned at the very beginning of the stream, you know, this is a team effort and this was not a one-man job. And so one of the challenges was just like accommodating so many people's schedules. And you know, I have experience working on a team before, but this is probably the team with the most moving pieces that I've ever been part of. And especially as the copy editor, I talk to every single writer throughout the process. And so it was a great experience to sort of learn how to just sort of like take every task as it comes. And I also think I gained some flexibility. I have, as a copy editor with opinions about grammar, you know, I came into this project with some pre-existing beliefs about spelling and punctuation, and I had to sort of learn some different style guides and stuff. So I definitely think I gained some flexibility and a greater appreciation for how rules don't always have to be perfectly followed. How about you guys? It looks like Lena, you have your hand up.
I learned how to not do everything at once and how to sometimes just switch off and take time for myself. And that's been super important because otherwise I would have probably burnt out.
For me, one of the things I struggle with is every time I read back one of my stories, I change little bits again. I keep editing, and I can't do that now because I handed it in to you and you turned it into paper. And that's a sort of finalization that I find difficult to accept and sort of be able to now read it and not want to tweak still. Which I'm sure there's like a deep, important life lesson in that I'm ignoring.
Thank you, Lola. Anyone else?
Well, go on, Julianne.
Sorry. I think generally for all of us, just incorporating technology more, we had, you know, the website and our social media outlets, and we knew those were going to be big on kind of like promoting events and everything else, but none of us saw live streams coming back in November when we started this. So I think kind of as a whole learning how to do this and work with it, but I think it also kind of helped because more people kind of got to see than if we did 1 or 2 events around Edinburgh. A lot more people have been able to come and join the live streams, which have been great. And I mean, we're still figuring them out as we go and people are so patient with us. But I think that's been a very interesting thing that although it was kind of forced upon us, might become maybe slightly more normalized for years to come.
Thanks, Julianne. Julia, did you have something to add?
No, it's just a detail. I just wanted to say I've definitely learned to edit myself, and I like that.
I love it. Thanks, Julia. So I lied. We actually have a very fun question coming in from Hans. So this is what I will use to close it out. A question for everybody. Hans asks, is there any piece of literature or any particular writer that has had a particular influence on you? So I'd love to hear from everyone in the chat today who is one of your greatest influences, maybe not ever, but maybe for this project especially. So let's go to town, guys.
I have to say that for this project especially, I think my reading of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde when I was 12 came back, but I think that's because of the city.
Saoirse, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I think my biggest inspiration, very surprising, is Charlotte Bronte, because of the way that she wrote about fear and everyday life in a poetic way. So I like writing poetry, but I also really like writing prose. So making it kind of poetic prose is what's important to me.
I refuse not to force people to read Diana Wynne Jones because she is the most amazing children's and fantasy author that has ever been. Sorry, Tolkien. And she's amazing, and more people should read her, and not enough people do. So do. And also in terms of this actual story, I really recommend Astrid Lindgren, who is Swedish. She wrote Pippi Longstockings, but she also wrote a bunch of other books that are really good and don't frequently get read because they weren't sort of widely sold in English, but they are available. They're great.
Thanks, Lola. Lena, you have your hand up.
Trying to unmute my mic. Thanks, Lola. I completely second that. I have a picture of Astrid Lindgren right here climbing a tree because she believed in climbing trees until a very old age. And yeah, she's just such an inspiration. But also this whole question I find really difficult to answer because you have to single somebody out. And I think Astrid Lindgren absolutely deserves to be singled out, also for her stance on children's rights and everything, and she's just amazing. But then I also think, I mean, with Sherwood, very obviously that was influenced by Robin Hood. And so there are, I think, the things that you read or have been lucky enough to have read to you as a child are very influential for at least for my writing. Like they just keep popping back up and influencing what I do and what I want to do with it.
Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah. I think Wallace Stevens poets, of course, are my inspiration. But yeah, I think my favorite is Wallace Stevens, and because he has this power to create powerful images with color, and he creates this kind of images, and it stands at the little room that we say, and he creates those little different rooms, and his imagery is impactful and mindful of the history of ideas, and he's incredible. So yeah, I think he's the one there for me.
Wonderful. Anyone else have someone to add before we, Kit, go ahead.
Well, the first line of this piece, I mean, it pretty much came together after I went to a reading by poet and short story writer David Constantine at Golden Hair Books. He was launching, or he was on his book tour for the Dressing Up box. But most of my writing, I mean, if I'm looking down an author who influences me most at the moment anyway, it would be Julian Barnes, and he deals a lot with time and memory, and his characters are always really deeply thoughtful, lots of inner story going on. So that's probably what I would say.
Can I just jump in before we close this question? I think for my writing, I would have to go with the big fantasy names, you know, Tolkien, Pullman, Rowling, Martin, Goodkind, just the big guys. Sorry.
Never apologize.
Yeah, I'll add that I love an author they're named Erin Morgenstern. She's contemporary and she just released a book a few months ago, but I just love the way she writes, and she just really kind of puts you in the story, and it's something that I kind of use as like something to strive for.
Wonderful. Lena, did you have something to add? Your hand is up.
Yeah, I did, but I also said feel free to ignore. It's up to you. So anyway, I just wanted to say that while like we all have these big influences, I think it's also important what you're currently reading. And this is a little cheesy, but I always think about it as breathing in and breathing out. So I can't write if I don't read. So I need to be reading good stuff. And the latest really good stuff that I read was Jane Alexander's A User's Guide to Make Believe. It was just amazing, and she's one of our professors here, so of course that's a real bonus to be able to learn from somebody who inspires your writing.
Saoirse has it up. I also recently read this book. It was great. Thank you, Jane, for writing it. Oh, wow. What a fun, we're all just having a Jane party. I love this. I love this so much. I think that's such a great way to wrap it up. We're very lucky to be studying at an institution where we can read work from the people who are teaching us. I think that's really, really wonderful. So I'm just going to pop a little reminder into the chat about where you can buy the anthology if you're interested in hearing more of all the stories. Sadly, we lost Monica near the beginning of the stream, but thank you so much, Monica, for reading with us today. Thank you for everyone who joined us and who bore with us during what was definitely the largest technical difficulty of the 3 streams. Zoom was just down across the whole UK today, so that was unexpected, but we rolled with the punches. And just a really wonderful job from all our readers. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to everyone who tunes in. Don't forget to visit fromr3c.com for more information about this volume.
And thanks, Lauren, for hosting. Great job, and well done for rolling with those punches.
Thank you, Lena. All right, thanks everyone. I'm going to end the stream here. Bye.
Bye. Bye.